The steady beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in my hospital room. My body ached, but the emotional pain was far worse. I stared at my phone, reading the text message for the 100th time. I can't handle this anymore. Don't try to find me. My name is Sophie Anderson, and at 32, I lay in the ICU while my husband of 8 years vanished with our life savings, leaving me to face a critical health crisis alone. It started with what I thought was a severe migraine. I'd been getting headaches for months, but Marcus, my husband, always dismissed them. "You're just stressed from work," he'd say, barely looking up from his phone. But this time was different. The pain was unbearable, and my vision started blurring. I called Marcus at work, my voice shaking. "I need you to take me to the hospital." There was a long pause before he answered. "I'm in an important meeting. Can't you call an Uber?" That should have been my first clue. By the time I got to the emergency room, I could barely stand. The doctors moved quickly. Words like aneurysm and immediate surgery floated around me. Through my haze of pain, I heard them trying to contact Marcus. He wasn't answering. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, my neurologist, was the first person to show real concern beyond my medical condition. "Your husband should be here," she said firmly, her eyes narrowing as she checked my admission forms. "Have you been experiencing any unusual stress at home?" I didn't answer. How could I explain that Marcus had become increasingly distant over the past year? That our joint accounts had seen some strange transfers I couldn't question because he always handled our finances? The surgery was scheduled for the next morning. I spent that night alone, sending unanswered texts to Marcus. My in-laws, Barbara and George, finally showed up around midnight. "No Marcus. He's just overwhelmed, sweetie." Barbara patted my hand, her perfectly manicured nails gleaming under the hospital lights. "Men sometimes struggle with medical situations. You know how sensitive he is." Sensitive. Right. Like when he was sensitive about my promotion last year and didn't speak to me for a week because I'd be earning more than him. The morning of my surgery, I checked my phone one last time. Still nothing from Marcus. But there was an alert from our bank. Multiple large transfers had been made in the past 24 hours. My heart started racing, setting off the monitors. Dr. Mitchell rushed in. "Sophie, you need to stay calm." She saw my phone, the bank alert still visible. Her expression hardened. "What's going on?" "He's taken everything," I whispered, the reality hitting me like a physical blow. "While I'm here, he's. That's when Barbara and George burst in. "We just got a text from Marcus," Barbara announced, her voice artificially bright. "He needs some time to think. He says he's sorry, but this is all too much for him. We need to respect his feelings." Dr. Mitchell's head snapped up. "Respect his feelings? Your son emptied their accounts while his wife needs emergency surgery." George stepped forward, his face red. "Now see here, this is a family matter. Sophie understands, don't you, dear?" Marcus has always been sensitive about hospitals since his father's passing. Once he's had time to process. Process what? Dr. Mitchell cut in. Abandoning his wife? Stealing their money? This isn't about sensitivity. This is about crime. Barbara gasped. "Crime? Don't be ridiculous. Marcus would never. He's just confused." "Sophie, tell her you won't press charges. You know how Marcus gets when he's cornered." I lay there, tears sliding down my face, remembering all the times I'd made excuses for Marcus's sensitivity. The missed family events, the controlled finances, the subtle put-downs. Dr. Mitchell stepped between me and my in-laws. "I'm calling hospital security and the police. Mrs. Anderson is about to undergo major surgery, and she needs support, not manipulation. If you can't provide that, you need to leave." "But we're family," Barbara protested. "Family doesn't abandon someone in their darkest hour," Dr. Mitchell replied firmly. "Now, please step out. I need to speak with my patient privately." As they left, muttering about overreaction and misunderstanding, Dr. Mitchell turned to me. "Sophie, there's something else you need to know. I seen the security footage from the hospital parking lot yesterday. Your husband was here." My heart stopped. "What?" "He came in, asked about your condition, and left immediately after speaking with the financial department. I don't think this was a panic response. I think it was planned." The monitor started beeping faster as the implications sank in. Marcus hadn't abandoned me in fear or confusion. He'd waited until I was helpless to make his move. Dr. Mitchell squeezed my hand. "We're going to postpone the surgery for a few hours. I'm calling the police, and then we're going to make sure you're protected. medically and legally. You're not alone in this, Sophie. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe I didn't need to stay quiet and understanding anymore. Maybe it was time for someone else to do the understanding, like a judge. The days following my surgery passed in a blur of recovery and revelations. Each new discovery felt like another betrayal, another crack in the foundation of what I thought was my life. Dr. Mitchell kept her word. Before I even woke up from surgery, she had not only contacted the police, but also reached out to the hospital's legal department. The security footage showed Marcus spending nearly an hour in the hospital, methodically visiting different departments, gathering information about my condition, and making calls. Detective Lisa Torres sat beside my bed, her notebook open. "Mrs. Anderson, we've traced your husband's movements. He didn't just empty your joint accounts, he had been systematically moving money for months. The large withdrawals on the day of your admission were just the final step." I stared at the ceiling, trying to process this. How much? Close to $300,000. He also took out a second mortgage on your house 3 weeks ago using forged signatures. The heart monitor betrayed my shock. A mortgage? Forged signatures? Who was this man I'd been married to? Barbara and George appeared every day, their tactics switching between guilt and anger. "You're destroying our family," Barbara hissed one afternoon. "The police? Really, Sophie?" Marcus made a mistake, but pressing charges? That's not what loving wives do. Dr. Mitchell, who had become my unexpected guardian angel, overheard this. "And abandoning your critically ill wife is what loving husbands do," she countered, checking my vitals with deliberate focus. "Interesting family values you have there, Mrs. Carter." The investigation revealed more than just financial fraud. Marcus had been planning this for nearly a year. He had a secret apartment in another city, registered under a false name. The police found receipts for jewelry and expensive restaurants, dates with someone else while I was working overtime to contribute to what I thought was our future. One morning, Detective Torres brought in a stack of documents. "We found these in his apartment. He's been investigating medical insurance payouts for conditions similar to yours. We believe," she hesitated, sharing a look with Dr. Mitchell. "We believe he was waiting for your condition to worsen," Dr. Mitchell finished, her voice tight with controlled anger. The timing of his departure wasn't just opportunistic. He wanted you incapacitated before he made his move. The implications made me physically ill. Had he known about my condition? Had he been waiting for me to get sick enough to be helpless? George stormed into my room that evening, waving his phone. "Marcus called us. He's willing to come back if you drop all this nonsense about charges. He says he'll even split the money with you. Isn't that generous? Just stop this vindictive behavior." I looked at this man, this enabler who had helped shape his son into someone who could abandon his wife during brain surgery, and found my voice. "Generous?" I said, sitting up straighter despite the pain. "Your son stole my money, forged my signature, and left me to die. He's not being generous. He's trying to escape consequences." "Now see here," George started, but I wasn't finished. "No, you see here. For 8 years, I've watched you and Barbara excuse everything Marcus does. His sensitivity about my career, his control over our finances, his constant need for validation. You helped create this situation by never holding him accountable." Well, guess what? Someone finally is. The room fell silent. Even the machines seemed to quiet down. "The police have everything," I continued, my voice growing stronger. "The footage, the forged documents, the evidence of premeditation. Your son didn't have a breakdown. He orchestrated this. And I'm done protecting him." George's face turned purple. "You ungrateful." "That's enough." Dr. Mitchell's voice cut through his rage. She stood in the doorway, security guards flanking her. "Mr. Carter, your presence is no longer welcome here. Please leave before I have you removed." As they escorted him out, Dr. Mitchell turned to me with a small smile. "Your latest scans look good. The surgery was successful, and your recovery is progressing well. You're stronger than they know, Sophie, much stronger." Looking at her, I realized something. In losing my husband and his family, I'd gained something unexpected: my voice, my strength, and allies who value truth over appearances. The police have frozen Marcus's known accounts, but Detective Torres warned me that recovering everything might take time. "He's hiding money," she explained, "but we'll find it. People like him always make mistakes. They think they're too clever to get caught." I thought about Marcus, about his carefully constructed image of sensitivity and refinement. He probably expected me to stay quiet, to accept his abandonment as another example of his delicate nature. Instead, he created his own downfall. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I remembered something my grandmother used to say: the truth has a way of surfacing, like a cork in water. You can push it down, but it always rises. Marcus had pushed down his true nature for years. Now everyone would see it float to the surface. 6 months after Marcus's disappearance, I stood in my newly remodeled living room, sunlight streaming through windows that no longer held memories of his presence. The house felt different now, lighter, peaceful, mine. Detective Torres had been right about people like Marcus making mistakes. His carefully constructed escape plan had one major flaw: pride. He couldn't resist showing off his new life on social media through a fake account, posting photos of exotic locations and expensive purchases. His attempt to flaunt his freedom became his undoing. We traced the IP addresses, Detective Torres explained during her last visit. He was using a VPN, but his patterns were predictable. Every Sunday night, like clockwork, he'd post from the same location: your husband is currently enjoying his stolen funds in a luxury apartment in Miami. The arrest was surprisingly anticlimactic. No dramatic chase, no tearful confrontation. Just Marcus, in his designer clothes, being led away in handcuffs while dining at an upscale restaurant. The look of shock on his face when the police approached his table was captured by security cameras, a moment of reality crashing through his carefully constructed fantasy. Barbara and George made one final attempt to intervene, showing up at my house unannounced. He's agreed to plead guilty, Barbara said, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. But he's asking for leniency. If you speak to the judge, tell them it was all a misunderstanding. I let her words trail off into silence before responding. The only misunderstanding was my belief that you were my family. A family doesn't defend theft and attempted murder. Murder. George exploded. Now you're just being dramatic. Dr. Mitchell, who had become a close friend and was over for dinner, stepped forward. Mr. Carter, your son withdrew all financial support from his wife immediately before critical brain surgery. He forged documents, stole her money, and left her unable to pay for life-saving medical care. What would you call that? They left without an answer, and I haven't heard from them since. The legal proceedings moved swiftly. Marcus's guilty plea came with a significant sentence: 8 years for fraud, theft, and endangerment. The judge was particularly harsh after reviewing Dr. Mitchell's testimony about the timing and premeditation of his actions. The court sees this as not merely financial fraud, the judge declared, but as a calculated attempt to benefit from the defendant's wife's medical crisis. This level of betrayal and endangerment cannot be overlooked. The restitution order was substantial. Every penny had to be returned, with interest. The hidden accounts were found, the second mortgage invalidated due to fraud, and his assets liquidated. But the greatest victory wasn't financial, it was discovering my own strength. Dr. Mitchell stood by me through everything, from medical recovery to emotional healing. You know, she said one evening as we shared tea in my garden, when I first saw you in the hospital, something in your eyes told me you were a fighter. You just needed someone to fight alongside you for a change. She was right. With proper support, I flourished. My recovery exceeded expectations, and I returned to work with a new perspective and determination. The company I work for, having learned of my story, promoted me to lead their new employee wellness program, turning my experience into a way to help others. I started a support group for survivors of financial abuse, sharing my story to help others recognize the warning signs I'd missed. The subtle control, the isolation, the manipulation of sensitivity to avoid accountability. Patterns became clear in hindsight. The house that Marcus had tried to mortgage away became a symbol of my transformation. I renovated it completely, replacing every trace of our shared life with expressions of my own taste. The man cave he'd insisted on became my art studio. His precious leather recliner was donated, and in its place stood a beautiful reading nook filled with books he called wasteful purchases. 1 year after my surgery, I hosted a new beginnings party. Friends, colleagues, and my support group members gathered to celebrate not just my recovery, but my renaissance. Dr. Mitchell raised a toast that brought tears to my eyes. To Safi, she said, who reminded us that true strength isn't in enduring abuse, but in standing up to it. and to new beginnings, which sometimes look like endings until you turn the page. As I looked around at these people who had supported me, believed me, and helped me rebuild, I realized something profound. Marcus hadn't just lost money and freedom. He'd lost the chance to know the person I'd become. His absence had made room for my presence. His betrayal had led to my empowerment. That night, after everyone left, I sat in my reading nook with a glass of wine, watching the sunset through my window. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Marcus's appeals had been denied. He would serve his full sentence. I closed the alert without reading further. His story was no longer part of mine. I had a different tale to tell now, one of resilience, recovery, and renewal. Sometimes I realized being abandoned is just life's way of setting you free. I opened my laptop to work on my book, Rising Strong, A Survivor's Guide to Financial Abuse. The cursor blinked on the blank page, ready for my story to begin again, this time told in my own voice, on my own terms. Olivia, darling, you can't possibly expect us to keep housing your situation. What will the Astors think when they come for the charity gala? Victoria's perfectly manicured hand waved dismissively at my 7-year-old son's toys, scattered across what used to be our room. My sister-in-law's voice dripped with the same false sweetness she used ever since marrying my brother James. I clutched Tommy's worn teddy bear, the last gift from his father before the accident, and tried to keep my voice steady. Victoria, we talked about this. James promised we could stay until I got back on my feet. It's only been 3 months. Yes, well, things change. She adjusted her designer blazer, a motion I'd seen her practice in the mirror countless times. James agrees it's time for you to find your own place. We have a reputation to maintain. My heart sank. Of course James agreed. He never could stand up to his wife. Not since she helped him land the partnership at her father's investment firm. The same firm that had rejected my late husband Michael's application years ago for being too working class. We have nowhere else to go, I said, hating how my voice cracked. Tommy just started school here. Not my problem. Victoria's smile turned sharp. I need this room for my new meditation space. The life coach says it's essential for maintaining my influencer aesthetic. You have until Friday. That was 2 days away. I looked around the small guest room that had become our sanctuary after Michael's death left us drowning in medical bills. Everything we owned fit into 3 boxes and a small suitcase. It wasn't much, but it was all Tommy had left of his old life. What about the trust? I asked quietly. Michael was James's brother too. Surely some of the family money. Victoria's laugh cut through me like glass. Oh honey, that money is for real family members, not charity cases who married in. Besides, James has already allocated those funds for my new charity foundation, Victoria's Vision, helping the truly deserving poor. She emphasized the word with a smirk that made it clear which category she thought we fell into. I wanted to scream, to remind her that I'd known James since college, long before she swept in with her family connections and social climbing schemes. I wanted to tell her about all the times Michael and James had sworn to always take care of each other's families. But I knew it would fall on deaf ears. That night, as I tucked Tommy into bed, his small voice broke my heart. Mommy, are we really leaving Uncle James's house? Where will we go? I pulled him close, breathing in his familiar scent of crayons and the apple shampoo he loved. We'll figure something out, sweetheart. We always do. But I like my new school, he whispered. And Uncle James promised to teach me chess like Daddy used to play. I blinked back tears. James hadn't played chess with Tommy once since we moved in. He was too busy attending Victoria's endless social events, parading around as the perfect power couple. The next day, I came home from my temporary job at the local diner to find our belongings piled unceremoniously in the driveway. Victoria stood in the doorway, surrounded by a group of women in expensive yoga wear. Oh good, you're here, she called out, not even trying to hide her satisfaction. We needed the space for my mindfulness workshop. These ladies paid top dollar for an authentic wellness experience. I watched as one of the women took a selfie in front of our pathetic pile of boxes, probably for her Instagram story about giving back to the community. My hands shook as I loaded our life into the back of my old Honda Civic, Tommy's confused questions echoing in my ears. That night, parked behind the 24-hour Walmart, I held my sleeping son and made a silent promise. Somehow, someway, I would give him back the stability he deserved. I just didn't know that opportunity would come so soon, or from such an unexpected direction. What Victoria didn't know, what even James didn't know, was that the last time Michael and I had dinner with them, nearly a year before his diagnosis, Victoria had let something slip after too many glasses of wine. Something about creative accounting at her father's firm, about moving money around to make certain wealthy clients' problems disappear. I kept that information to myself, even after they threw us out like yesterday's trash. But now, as I scrolled through my phone's photos and found the picture I'd taken of Victoria's carelessly discarded paperwork that night, I realized I was holding onto something far more valuable than family money. The next morning, as I dropped Tommy off at his new school across town, my phone buzzed with a news alert. FBI raids prominent investment firm. I clicked the link, and there it was. Victoria's father's company was under investigation for massive fraud. My phone rang almost immediately. Victoria's name flashed on the screen, and for the first time since she'd married my brother, I heard real fear in her voice. "Olivia," she said, dropping all pretense of superiority. "We need to talk. Now." I looked at the photo on my phone again, the one showing exactly where the bodies were buried in Victoria's perfect world. "Yes," I replied calmly. "I suppose we do." I chose to meet Victoria at a small coffee shop across town, far from her usual luxury haunts. The irony wasn't lost on me as she slipped in wearing oversized sunglasses and a plain black hoodie, the kind of common clothing she'd always mocked me for wearing. "You look terrible," I'd observed, noting her shaking hands as she clutched her designer purse. Gone was the perfectly coiffed social media queen who had thrown my son's belongings onto her driveway just 3 weeks ago. "They arrested Daddy this morning," she whispered, glancing nervously around the cafe. "James is being questioned by the FBI. They're saying something about money laundering, tax evasion. Olivia, they're freezing all our accounts." I took a slow sip of my coffee, remembering the night Tommy and I spent in our car because the cheap motel she had generously recommended was full. "How unfortunate," I replied. "What does this have to do with me?" Her composure cracked. "Don't play dumb. I know you were there that night, the night I was talking about the special accounts. James said you might have seen something." She leaned forward, desperation evident in her voice. "We need those documents back. The ones that disappeared from my desk." "You mean the ones showing how your father's firm helped billionaires hide their money in offshore accounts?" I pulled out my phone, watching her face pale as I showed her the photo. "The same documents you were so carelessly waving around while bragging about your family's influence." "Please," she whispered, her carefully maintained facade crumbling completely. "Those papers prove Daddy was just following orders from the board. Without them, he'll take the fall for everything. James could go to prison too." "James?" I raised an eyebrow. "My brother, who stood by while you threw his nephew out on the street. That James." Victoria's hands twisted in her lap. "I know how it looks, but it wasn't personal. We had an image to maintain, a lifestyle." "A lifestyle built on stolen money," I interrupted. "While Tommy and I struggled to afford basic necessities, you were hosting parties with money that belonged to other people." "What do you want?" she asked, her voice small. "Name your price. Once this blows over, we can." I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make her flinch. "You still don't get it, do you? You think everything can be bought and sold. That's exactly why you're in this mess." "Then why did you agree to meet me?" I pulled out a thick manila envelope and placed it on the table. "Because despite everything, Tommy still asks about his Uncle James. Because somewhere under all that designer clothing and fake charity work, you're still my brother's wife." Victoria reached for the envelope, but I held it firm. "But understand this, my help comes with conditions." "Anything," she said quickly, too quickly. "First, you're going to transfer ownership of the guest house, the one you turned into your wellness space, back to James's family trust, where it belonged before you convinced him to sign it over to you. Tommy and I will live there, rent-free, for as long as we need." She nodded frantically. "Done." "What else?" "Second, you're going to publicly apologize. To me, to Tommy, and to all the other families your father's firm has hurt. No PR spin, no social media aesthetic. Just the truth." "But my followers are the least of your concerns right now," I cut in. "Finally, you're going to start actually helping people. Not with fancy galas and photo ops, but with real work. The kind that doesn't come with a hashtag." Victoria stared at me for a long moment. I could almost see her weighing her options, calculating if there was another way out. Finally, she nodded. The papers, they'll help prove Daddy was just following orders. They'll show he wasn't the mastermind, I confirmed. But he wasn't innocent either. None of you were. As I stood to leave, Victoria grabbed my wrist. Why didn't you turn these over to the FBI right away? You could have ruined us weeks ago. I thought about Tommy, about the lessons I wanted to teach him. Because revenge might feel good for a moment, but justice lasts longer. Sometimes the best way to change people is to show them a better way. I don't deserve your help, she admitted quietly. No, I agreed. You don't, but Tommy deserves his family, and James, despite his mistakes, deserves a chance to make things right. I left her sitting there, the envelope containing her family's potential salvation in her manicured hands. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from James, the first contact he had initiated since we were thrown out. Can we talk? It read. Please? I looked up at the clear autumn sky, thinking about second chances and the power of choices. Yes, I typed back. We can talk. 6 months later, I stood in the guesthouse kitchen, watching Tommy and James play chess through the window. My brother was teaching him the same moves Michael used to practice, their heads bent together in concentration. It wasn't perfect, but it was something real, more real than all of Victoria's carefully curated family photos had ever been. The aftermath of the FBI investigation had shaken the foundations of Victoria's perfect world. Her father took a plea deal, his sentence reduced thanks to the evidence I provided showing the board's larger involvement. James avoided criminal charges, but had to step down from the firm. The scandal rocked their social circle, and Victoria's influencer empire crumbled overnight. But sometimes, losing everything helps you find what matters. More cookies, Uncle James. Tommy called out, his face brightening as James captured one of his pawns. Your mom's cookies. Absolutely, James replied, and I saw genuine warmth in his smile, the kind that had been missing during all those years he'd spent chasing Victoria's version of success. I heard the crunch of gravel and looked up to see Victoria walking toward the house. She wasn't wearing designer clothes anymore. Her community service at the local homeless shelter required more practical attire. The change in her went deeper than clothing, though. I brought the shelter's financial reports, she said as she entered, placing a folder on the counter. After her public apology had gone viral, she'd thrown herself into actual charity work, not for the photo ops or social media praise, but because somewhere along the way, she discovered she was good at it. We've got enough donations to expand the education program. I nodded, remembering how she'd once spent more on a single gala than the shelter's entire yearly budget. Tommy's class is doing a book drive for the Children's Corner. I know, she said with a slight smile. He told me yesterday when I was helping him with his math homework. She paused, watching James and Tommy through the window. I never thanked you properly, you know, for not using those documents to destroy us completely. It wasn't about destruction, I replied, measuring coffee grounds for a fresh pot. It was about correction. Victoria was quiet for a moment. I found my old vision board while cleaning out the mansion, she said finally. All those magazine cutouts of perfect homes and luxury vacations. I actually thought that stuff would make me happy. And now? Now I know what real wealth looks like. She glanced meaningfully at Tommy and James. It looks like second chances. The doorbell rang, and I heard Tommy's excited footsteps as he ran to answer it. It was Laura, James's new girlfriend, a kindergarten teacher he'd met while volunteering at the shelter's after-school program. She wasn't anything like Victoria, and that was exactly what made her perfect for him. Later that evening, as we all sat around the dinner table, a simple meal, nothing like Victoria's elaborate dinner parties, I thought about how life has a way of teaching us what we need to learn. Victoria had lost her mansion but found her purpose. James had lost his prestigious job but rediscovered his family. And me, I'd lost my home but found something stronger. The power to forge change through compassion rather than revenge. Mom, Tommy tugged at my sleeve, can we show Aunt Victoria my science project tomorrow? She promised to help me make it better for the fair. I caught Victoria's eye across the table and saw tears threatening to spill. Of course, sweetie, I said. I think Aunt Victoria would love that. As I watched my son chattering excitedly about his project, I remembered something Michael used to say. True class isn't about what you have. It's about how you treat people who can't give you anything in return. Victoria had learned that lesson the hard way, but sometimes the hardest lessons leave the most lasting impact. Victoria said quietly as she helped me with the dishes later. I used to think I was better than everyone else because of what I owned. Now I realize I was just empty inside, trying to fill the void with things instead of real connections. I handed her a plate to dry. The good thing about hitting bottom is you can rebuild on solid ground. She nodded, understanding the deeper meaning. We weren't best friends, and maybe we never would be. But we were family, not the picture-perfect kind she used to pretend to have, but the real kind, built on understanding, forgiveness, and growth. As I tucked Tommy into bed that night, he asked, "Are we rich now, Mom?" I thought about everything we'd gained and lost over the past months. We're rich in the ways that matter, honey. We have family, we have a home, and we have each other. Some people spend their whole lives chasing wealth and never find that kind of fortune. He smiled sleepily, clutching his teddy bear, the same one I held the day Victoria kicked us out. "I like our kind of rich better," he mumbled as he drifted off. I kissed his forehead, silently agreeing. Sometimes life's greatest wealth comes disguised as loss, and its greatest victories wear the face of mercy rather than revenge. "I don't care where you go," Victoria's voice rang through the neighborhood as she stood in the doorway of what had been our family home for the past 12 years. My children, Emily, 10, and Marcus, 8, huddled close to me on the sidewalk, their small hands clutching garbage bags filled with whatever belongings they had managed to grab before Victoria changed the locks. My name is Olivia Parker, and at 35, I never imagined I'd be standing on the street watching my sister-in-law laugh as my children cried. Just 3 months after losing my husband James to a car accident, his sister Victoria has shown her true colors. "This house is mine now," she smirked, waving the deed she'd somehow convinced James to sign over to her before his death. "Your kids crying won't change anything. You should have thought about this before letting James put everything in my name." I held Emily and Marcus closer as they trembled against me. The autumn wind whipped around us, scattering leaves across the lawn I'd carefully tended for over a decade. Inside, I could already see Victoria rearranging furniture, acting as if we had never existed. "Victoria, please," I tried one last time, my voice steady despite the fear churning in my stomach. "The kids have school tomorrow. Just give us a few days to find somewhere to go." She laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Not my problem. You're resourceful, aren't you? Figure it out." The door slammed shut with finality, leaving us alone as the sun began to set. Emily looked up at me, her brown eyes, so much like her father's, filled with tears. "Mom, where are we going to sleep?" I swallowed hard, forcing a smile I didn't feel. "Don't worry, sweetie. We'll figure something out." But as I stood there, watching my children shiver in the growing darkness, I had no idea what our next move would be. The local motels were beyond our budget. Victoria had somehow gained access to our joint accounts 2 weeks ago, leaving them empty. My salary as a part-time bookkeeper barely covered our basic needs, and now we didn't even have a roof over our heads. As I loaded our meager belongings into our old Honda, my mind raced through our options. My parents had passed years ago, and most of our friends were really James's friends. They had slowly disappeared after his death, uncomfortable with a widow's grief. "Mom?" Marcus's small voice broke through my thoughts. "Why does Aunt Victoria hate us?" The question hit me like a physical blow. How could I explain to an 8-year-old that his aunt's hatred stemmed from years of jealousy and resentment? That Victoria had never forgiven James for choosing to marry me instead of following her plan for him to join her business venture. "She doesn't hate us, sweetheart," I lied, helping him buckle his seatbelt. Sometimes adults make decisions that are hard to understand. As we drove away from our home, I caught one last glimpse of Victoria in the window, already on the phone, probably calling her friends to brag about her victory. The sight made something shift inside me, a quiet determination taking root where despair had threatened to overwhelm. We ended up at Sarah's house, my colleague from work. She took one look at us standing on her doorstep and immediately ushered us inside. "Stay as long as you need," she insisted, helping the kids settle onto her living room couch. That night, after Emily and Marcus had finally fallen asleep, I sat at Sarah's kitchen table, staring at my phone. Text messages from Victoria kept arriving, each one more gloating than the last. "Redecorating tomorrow, throwing out all your tacky decorations. The kids' rooms will make perfect home offices. Should have made sure James left something for you in writing." I blocked her number, my hands steady despite the anger coursing through me. Victoria thought she had won, thought she had broken us. She had no idea that her cruelty had just lit a fire inside me that would change everything. The next morning, while the kids were at school, I met with a lawyer. James' old college friend, Michael Bennett, listened intently as I explained everything. The suspicious deed transfer, the drained bank accounts, Victoria's sudden claim to everything we had built. "Something's not right here," Michael said, frowning as he reviewed the documents. James was meticulous about legal matters. He wouldn't have just signed over the house without telling you. And these bank transfers, they don't match his signature pattern. Hope flickered in my chest for the first time since Victoria had shown up with that deed. "What are you saying?" Michael leaned forward, his expression serious. "I'm saying we need to look closer at when these documents were signed and how Victoria might have overplayed her hand." As I left his office, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Victoria's cruel eviction: purpose. She thought she had taken everything from us. But she had forgotten one crucial thing. I had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. That evening, as I tucked Emily and Marcus into their temporary beds at Sarah's house, Emily grabbed my hand. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" I kissed her forehead, my resolve strengthening. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to be more than okay. Sometimes life has a way of teaching people important lessons." Victoria had no idea what was coming. She thought she had written the end of our story, but really she had just set the stage for her own downfall. And I was going to make sure justice was served, not just for my children, but for James's memory too. 3 months after our eviction, Victoria's perfect world started to crack. I was working late at Sarah's dining table, reviewing documents Michael had uncovered when my phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made my coffee go cold. "Local business owner under investigation for financial fraud." There was Victoria's company photo, her practiced smile now looking more like a grimace. The article detailed suspicious transactions, falsified documents, and questionable business practices. But what caught my eye was the time frame. The investigation focused on the months leading up to James's death. Michael called minutes later. "Olivia, turn on the local news. They're raiding Victoria's offices right now." I watched the live coverage, my hands shaking as I recognized faces from James' old workplace being escorted out in handcuffs. Victoria wasn't among them, yet. "There's more," Michael said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Remember those bank transfers? We traced them. Victoria didn't just empty your accounts. She'd been siphoning money from James's business accounts for months before his death. The signatures on those transfers, they were dated after the accident. My blood ran cold. She forged his signature. Not just on the bank documents, Michael confirmed. That deed she used to claim the house. The notary just confirmed they never signed it. Victoria to forge everything, Olivia. She's been planning this since before James died." The pieces started falling into place. Victoria's constant presence after James' accident, her insistence on helping with paperwork, the way she'd slowly isolated us from family friends. She hadn't just stolen our home, she orchestrated an entire scheme. The next morning, I dropped the kids at school and headed to my old neighborhood. Victoria had transformed our modest family home into a showcase of her newfound wealth. Expensive cars in the driveway, professional landscaping replacing the garden the kids and I had planted together. As I parked across the street, a familiar figure rushed out the front door. Victoria looked nothing like the confident woman who had thrown us out months ago. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her hair disheveled, and her face pale with panic. She spotted my car and froze. For a moment, our eyes met across the street. I didn't wave, didn't smile, didn't give her any reaction at all. I just watched as she scrambled into her Mercedes and sped away. "She's running," I texted Michael. His response was immediate. "Police are already on their way. Don't worry, she won't get far." That evening, the local news painted a devastating picture of Victoria's crimes. Not only had she embezzled from her own company, but she also forged documents and stolen identities, including her dead brothers, to secure loans and properties. Sarah watched the coverage with me after the kids were asleep. "I can't believe she thought she'd get away with this," she said, shaking her head. "She always thought she was smarter than everyone else," I replied, remembering Victoria's smug smile the day she had evicted us. She never expected anyone to look too closely at her perfect life. The next day, Michael called with news that changed everything. The FBI found Victoria's laptop, he said. You won't believe what was in her emails. She'd been planning this for years, Olivia. There are messages to accomplices discussing how to forge James's signature, how to transfer assets without raising suspicion, even. He paused, his voice hardening. Even discussions about James' accident not being an accident at all. I sat down hard, my legs giving out. What are you saying? I'm saying the FBI is expanding their investigation. This isn't just about fraud anymore. Victoria may have been involved in James's death. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. All those months of grieving, of trying to hold our family together, while Victoria had orchestrated everything from the shadows. Later that week, as I helped Emily with her homework at Sarah's kitchen table, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Victoria. Please, Olivia, I need your help. They're going to arrest me. Think about family. Think about James. I can make things right. I showed the message to Michael, who immediately forwarded it to the FBI. Within hours, they tracked Victoria's location to a small motel just outside the city limits. The news showed her being led out in handcuffs, her perfect facade finally shattered completely. That night, as I tucked my children into bed, still in Sarah's guest room, but not for much longer, Emily asked the question I had been dreading. Mom, is Aunt Victoria going to jail? I sat on the edge of her bed, choosing my words carefully. Yes, sweetheart. She did some very bad things, and now she has to face the consequences. Marcus, always the sensitive one, looked troubled. But she's family, right? Shouldn't we help her? I pulled them both close, breathing in the scent of their freshly washed hair. Sometimes, honey, people who are supposed to be family make choices that hurt us. And when that happens, we don't have to keep them in our lives. As they drifted off to sleep, I thought about Victoria sitting in a jail cell. Her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. She had thought she'd won when she threw us out on the street. But she'd forgotten something crucial. The truth always finds its way to the light. 1 year after Victoria's arrest, I stood in front of our old house, keys in hand. The court had reversed all of Victoria's fraudulent property transfers, returning our home to its rightful owners, my children and me. Emily and Marcus ran ahead, eager to reclaim their old rooms. Everything looked smaller, Emily observed, her hand trailing along the banister James had installed when she was learning to walk. The house still bore traces of Victoria's brief ownership, gaudy wallpaper, pretentious furniture she'd bought with stolen money. But underneath it all, our home's bones remained unchanged. Like us, it had weathered the storm and survived. That morning, I had received a letter from Victoria's prison. Her handwriting, once so precise and elegant, now looked shaky and uncertain. Olivia, the prosecutors offered me a deal. They'll reduce my sentence if I provide information about James' accident. I know I don't deserve your help, but please, I'm desperate. Prison is killing me. Just talk to them. Tell them I've changed. Victoria. I folded the letter and slipped it into my pocket, remembering the night she'd thrown us out, the way she had laughed at my children's tears. The investigation had revealed the full scope of her crimes. Not only had she forged documents and stolen our home, but she had also been involved in orchestrating the accident that took James from us. Her desperation now felt like poetic justice. Mom, Marcus called from upstairs. Can we paint my room blue again? Like it was before? Of course, sweetheart, I answered, climbing the stairs. We can make this house ours again. Later that evening, as we sat on boxes eating takeout pizza, Michael stopped by with the final paperwork from the court. Victoria's sentencing is next week, he said, watching the kids explore their old new home. With the evidence they have, she's looking at 20 years minimum. Good, I said simply. The woman who had thought she could steal our lives, who had played a role in taking their father from them, deserved every minute of those years. A week later, I sat in the courtroom, watching Victoria in her prison jumpsuit as she pleaded for leniency. Gone was the designer wardrobe, the imperious attitude, the certainty that she could control everything and everyone around her. When the judge asked if I wanted to make a statement, I stood, my voice clear and steady. A year ago, this woman, my children's aunt, threw us onto the street without mercy. She laughed at their tears, stole their inheritance, and as we now know, played a role in their father's death. She showed no compassion then and deserves none now. Victoria crumpled in her seat as the judge delivered her sentence minus 25 years. No possibility of early parole. That evening, as I tucked the kids into their own beds, in their own rooms for the first time in over a year, Emily asked, "Is it wrong that I don't feel sad about Aunt Victoria?" I sat on the edge of her bed, choosing my words carefully. "No, sweetheart. Sometimes people make choices so bad that they lose the right to be part of our lives. What matters is that we're together, and we're home." Months passed, and slowly, our house became truly ours again. We replanted the garden, repainted the walls, and created new memories to replace the painful ones. Victoria's expensive furniture was sold, the money going to a fund for victims of financial fraud. One afternoon, while sorting through old boxes in the attic, I found a photo album from happier times. James and Victoria as children, smiling, innocent. I wondered when she had changed, when greed and jealousy had twisted her into someone capable of destroying her own family. The last message I received from Victoria came on the anniversary of our eviction. "I underestimated you, Olivia. I thought you were weak, that you'd never fight back. I was wrong about everything. I'm sorry." I didn't respond. Her apology, like everything else about her, came too late and meant too little. Today, our home rings with children's laughter again. Emily and Marcus are healing, growing stronger every day. Sometimes, when I watch them play in the yard or do homework at the kitchen table, I think about how Victoria's cruelty ultimately led to justice, not just for us, but for everyone she had hurt. She thought throwing us out would break us. Instead, it made us unbreakable. "Where are they?" Margaret's shrill voice cut through my office like a knife, making me jump in my chair. My ex-mother-in-law stood in the doorway, her perfectly manicured hands clutching a manila envelope, her face twisted with rage. Behind her, my ex-husband's sister, Amanda, looked equally furious. "Where are who?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady as I gestured for my assistant to hold my calls. After 5 years of peace following my divorce from their precious David, I hadn't expected to see any of the Henderson family again. "Don't play dumb with us, Victoria," Margaret spat, storming toward my desk. "Our grandchildren, David's children. The ones you've been hiding from us for the past 6 years. I felt my jaw drop. "What children? David and I never had kids." Amanda stepped forward, yanking photos from the envelope her mother held. She slapped them onto my desk, scattering my carefully organized case files. "These children, Victoria. Stop lying." My hands trembled as I picked up the first photo. It showed 2 children, a boy and a girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, playing in what looked like a backyard. They had dark hair like mine, and something about their features did remind me of David. But I'd never seen them before in my life. "I don't understand," I said, looking up at their expectant faces. "These aren't my children. David and I tried for years, remember? That's part of why we divorced. We couldn't have kids." "More lies." Margaret's voice rose higher. "We have proof, medical records showing you were pregnant, birth certificates, school records. Everything." My head spun. This had to be some kind of sick joke. I'd never been pregnant, never given birth. The fertility treatments we tried had all failed. It was one of the many things David had held against me when he left. "Get out," I said firmly, standing up. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but I want you out of my office right now." "Or what?" Amanda sneered. "You'll hide these kids somewhere else? Move them to another state like you did last time?" "Last time? What are you talking about?" My voice cracked. "I've never moved any children anywhere. I don't have children." Margaret pulled out her phone. "We're calling our lawyer. We have rights as grandparents. You can't keep them from us forever." I grabbed my own phone, hands shaking as I pulled up my lawyer's number. Sarah had handled my divorce and knew everything about my marriage to David. She'd know how to deal with this insanity. "Fine," I said, pressing the call button. "Let's get lawyers involved, because I can prove I've never had children." As I waited for Sarah to answer, Margaret pulled out more photos. These showed the same children at what appeared to be a birthday party, then at a beach, then in front of a Christmas tree. In each one, they looked happy, healthy, and completely unfamiliar to me. "Sarah," I said when she picked up, trying to keep my voice from shaking, "I need you to come to my office right now. My ex-husband's family is here claiming I have children I've been hiding. They have photos and supposedly documents." There was a pause on the other end. "Don't say anything else," Sarah replied, her tone sharp. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. Don't let them leave." Margaret was still ranting about grandparents' rights and legal action when my assistant, Jackie, poked her head in. Victoria? There's a man here asking about the children, too. He says he's a private investigator hired by Mr. Henderson. My stomach dropped. David was behind this? But why? What could he possibly gain from this elaborate charade? Send him in, I said, meeting Margaret's triumphant gaze. Let's see what evidence you think you have. The private investigator was a tall man in a cheap suit who introduced himself as Frank Moore. He carried a thick folder and had the decency to look uncomfortable as he laid out what he'd found. Mrs. Reed has been living under multiple aliases, he explained to Margaret and Amanda. She's moved these children between 3 different states in the past 6 years, always staying just ahead of Mr. Henderson's attempts to locate them. That's impossible, I interrupted. I've lived in the same house for 8 years. I've worked at this law firm for 10. Anyone can verify that. Frank pulled out more documents, school records, medical files, even what looked like birth certificates, all showing that I, Victoria Reed, had given birth to twins on May 15, 6 years ago. But I hadn't. I would remember giving birth to twins. I would remember having children. I would know if I were a mother. Wouldn't I? A horrible thought crept in. There had been that 3-month period during my marriage when I'd suffered from severe depression, when everything was a blur of medications and therapy. But surely I would remember being pregnant, giving birth. Sarah burst into the office before I could spiral further into doubt. One look at the scene, the scattered photos, the documents, my ex-mother-in-law's righteous anger, and her face hardened. Everyone sit down, she commanded. Victoria, don't say another word. Mr. Moore, I'm going to need to see every single document you have, and I want to know exactly who hired you and when. As Sarah took control of the situation, I stared at the photos of the children who were supposedly mine. Their dark hair, their familiar features, the way the little girl's nose crinkled when she smiled, just like David's did. But they weren't mine. They couldn't be. Could they? The next morning, I sat in Sarah's office, staring at the pile of documents spread across her desk. After clearing everyone out yesterday, she'd spent hours examining every piece of evidence the private investigator had brought. These are good forgeries, she said, holding up one of the birth certificates. Really good. But they are forgeries. Look at the hospital name, Mercy General in Portland. That hospital closed in 2015, a year before these certificates were supposedly issued. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. So I'm not crazy. Those aren't my children. No, Sarah confirmed, but someone went to a lot of trouble to make it look like they are. The question is why. I picked up one of the photos, studying the children's faces. They do look like they could be mine and David's. The timing would be right if I had been pregnant when he claimed I was emotionally unstable. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Victoria, I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there any possibility, any at all, that you could have had children during that period? No, I said firmly. I was depressed, yes. The fertility treatments had failed again. David was already pulling away. But I wasn't so far gone that I wouldn't remember being pregnant, having children. Okay, Sarah started organizing the documents into neat piles. Then we need to figure out who these children really are and why your ex-husband's family is so convinced they're yours. Just then, Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her expression turning grim. Speaking of David, he just filed for an emergency custody hearing. He's claiming you kidnapped his children 6 years ago, and he's only now located them. What? I stood up, my hands shaking. He can't do that. There are no children to have custody of. Sit down, Sarah said firmly. This is good. It means we can get him under oath, make him explain where these supposedly missing children have been all this time. I sank back into my chair, my mind racing. But what if he actually has children somewhere? What if he had them with someone else while we were still married? Sarah's eyes lit up. That's actually a very interesting theory. Give me a minute. She turned to her computer, fingers flying over the keyboard. After a few minutes, she sat back with a satisfied smile. Got it. Meet Emily Carson, pediatric nurse at County General. Started working there 7 years ago, right around the time you and David were going through fertility treatments. She turned the screen toward me, showing a social media profile. My heart stopped. There was Emily, a pretty blonde woman, standing with 2 dark-haired children. the same children from the photos. Those are her kids, I whispered. But why would David? Because 6 years ago, Sarah continued, scrolling through Emily's profile. She filed a paternity suit against a prominent local businessman who she claimed was the father of her twins. The case was sealed, but given the timing. David, I finished. He got her pregnant while we were trying to have children, while I was going through fertility treatments. The pieces started falling into place. The timing of my emotional breakdown, David's insistence that I had been pregnant but blocked it out, his family's genuine belief that these children were mine. He's been lying to everyone, I said, my voice shaking with anger now. He told his family I was the mother to cover up his affair, and now that Emily's gone public. Now he needs to maintain the lie. Sarah finished, or his whole story falls apart. But he made one crucial mistake. What's that? Sarah held up the forged birth certificate again. He listed you as the mother but kept Emily's original choice of names for the twins, James and Lily Carson, not Henderson or Reed. She started gathering the documents into a folder. The emergency hearing is tomorrow morning. I think it's time we invited Emily Carson to tell her side of the story. I stared at the photo of the children, David's children, but not mine. Never mine. His family really doesn't know. Do they? They actually believe I'm some kind of monster who stole their grandchildren. That's what David wanted them to believe, Sarah said softly. It was easier than admitting the truth. Well, I stood up, straightening my shoulders. Let's see how they handle the truth now. As I left Sarah's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. We're praying you'll do the right thing and bring our grandchildren home. I saved the message. Tomorrow they'd learn exactly what the right thing was, and it wasn't what they expected. Looking at Emily's photo again, I felt a strange mix of emotions. These children, who could have been mine in another life, were innocent in all this. They deserved to know their family, their real story. And tomorrow, one way or another, the truth would come out. I just hoped they were ready for it. The courtroom was packed the next morning. David sat at the plaintiff's table, wearing the same self-righteous expression I remembered from our divorce. Margaret and Amanda sat directly behind him, shooting daggers at me with their eyes. Sarah had positioned me perfectly, just close enough to Emily Carson that when she walked in with the twins, David's face went completely white. What is she doing here? He hissed to his lawyer. Before anyone could respond, the judge entered and called the emergency hearing to order. David's lawyer jumped up, launching into an impassioned speech about a mother stealing children away, about grandparents' rights, and about family reunification. I watched Margaret dabbing her eyes with a tissue, completely caught up in the performance. She really had no idea what her precious son had done. Your Honor, Sarah said when it was our turn, before we proceed, I'd like to enter into evidence the true birth certificates of James and Lily Carson, along with their mother's paternity suit from 6 years ago. David's lawyer objected, but Sarah was ready. The children Mr. Henderson claims were stolen from him. They're sitting right here with their actual mother, Emily Carson. The only person doing any stealing is Mr. Henderson, stealing the truth from his family and trying to steal these children's identities. The judge looked at the documents, then at David, whose confidence was visibly crumbling. Mr. Henderson, would you like to explain why there are 2 different birth certificates for these children? There must be some mistake, David stammered. The mistake, Emily Carson spoke up from behind me, her voice strong and clear, was thinking you could hide the truth forever, David. These are my children, our children, the ones you denied until it became convenient to claim them. The gasps from Margaret and Amanda were audible. The judge called a brief recess to review all the evidence, but the damage was done. I watched as David's carefully constructed lie fell apart around him. During the break, Margaret approached me in the hallway, her face ashen. Victoria, we didn't know. He told us you had a breakdown, that you took the babies and ran. And you believed him, I said quietly, just like you believed him when he said our fertility treatments failed because of my stress. Because it was easier than questioning your perfect son. She started to respond, but Emily walked up with the twins. Mrs. Henderson, I think it's time you met your grandchildren, properly this time. I slipped away as Margaret faced the reality of what her son had done. The tears in her eyes were different now, shame and regret replacing righteous anger. Back in the courtroom, the judge's ruling was swift and decisive. Not only was David's emergency custody petition denied, but he was also facing potential criminal charges for filing false documents. The judge ordered a full investigation into the forged birth certificates. "I hope it was worth it," I said to David as he hurried past me afterward. "All these years of lies just to avoid admitting you had an affair." He stopped, turning to face me. "You were always so perfect, weren't you? The successful lawyer, the victim. You have no idea what it's like, disappointing everyone." "No," I cut him off. "I just know what it's like to be disappointed. By you, by your family, by their willingness to believe the worst of me rather than the truth about you." 6 months later, I received a letter from Emily. She enclosed a photo of the twins at their 7th birthday party, surrounded by the Henderson family, minus David, who was serving time for document fraud. "They ask about you sometimes," she wrote. "I tell them you're the brave lady who helped their grandparents find them. Maybe someday, when they're older, they'll understand the whole story." I pinned the photo to my office wall, next to my law degree and the newspaper article about David's conviction, not as a reminder of what I'd lost, but of what I gained, the truth, my reputation, and finally, closure. Margaret still sends me Christmas cards. Each one contains an apology, as if she's trying to make up for years of blind faith in her son. I keep them in a drawer, unopened. Some wounds take longer to heal than others. As for me, I sold my house and moved to a new city, starting fresh where no one knew my story. My new office has a view of the sunrise, and every morning I remind myself that sometimes losing what you thought you wanted leads you exactly where you need to be. The children who were never mine are happy, loved, and surrounded by family who finally knows the truth. In the end, that's worth more than any victory in court. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, I look at their photo and smile, knowing that doing the right thing meant letting go of the lie that had haunted us all.